Why did the AK-47 become the king of rifles? On December 23, 2013, Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov passed away in Izhevsk, Udmurt Republic, Russia, at the age of 94. Despite his modest retirement pension of less than $400, this father of firearms created the world-renowned AK-47, a weapon that has left an indelible mark on history. The AK-47 has played various roles throughout its existence: a sword for liberation fighters against colonizers, a scepter for superpowers to subdue smaller nations, an axe for dictators to oppress their people, and a spear for warlords to battle each other. Since its inception in the game Counter-Strike (CS), this gun has been a staple for players for over 24 years. Its popularity stems from its ability to kill with a single headshot in most situations, making it a favorite among gamers. In reality, the AK-47 is also considered the most iconic light weapon in the world. So, what makes it so magical that it's called the King of Guns? Let's explore this further. Kalashnikov began developing the AK-47 automatic rifle towards the end of World War II. In 1946, the AK-46 prototype stood out in rigorous tests. The following year, the Ministry of Defense approved its design, naming it the AK-47 and subsequently equipping troops with it. During the Stalin era, the AK-47 was treated as a secret weapon, with strict prohibitions on leaking any information about it. At this time, the AK couldn't be provided to other countries, and the Soviet Union itself had no wars to fight, so it rarely appeared in public, far from its future King of Guns reputation. Interestingly, the AK-47's debut wasn't in a conflict between Eastern and Western blocs, but rather when the Soviet Union suppressed its socialist allies. In 1956, during the Hungarian uprising, civilians were powerless against Soviet T-54 tanks and AK-47s. This one-sided crushing only gave the AK a brief appearance. Later, in 1968, when Soviet troops entered Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia, they again brought the AK for a test run. However, it wasn't the Soviet military that first made the AK famous worldwide, but the Vietnamese People's Army. The Vietnam War was America's most painful defeat after World War II. No matter how terrifying the U.S. airstrikes were, once on the ground, American troops found themselves terrified when facing Vietnamese guerrillas armed with AKs. A Vietnamese farmer working in a rice paddy might pull an AK from the water and open fire as soon as you turned your back. American soldiers resting in the jungle might encounter a talking tree and be ambushed, so how did American guns perform? The M14 didn't fare well in Vietnam. Its design philosophy inherited from the M1 Garand was already outdated. Moreover, the needs of the military and soldiers were often at odds. The military wanted one bullet to kill one enemy to reduce supply pressure, while soldiers preferred rapid fire with more bullets for intense firepower. Many of the M14's design improvements were based on experiences from the Korean War, which had a mountainous environment requiring long-range precision strikes. As a result, the M14 was superior to the AK in range, power, and accuracy. However, it used full-power cartridges and was mostly issued in semi-automatic mode because its recoil was too strong to control in full auto. The Vietnamese environment was completely different from Korea. In the jungle, American troops armed with long-range, precise semi-automatic rifles were frustrated when facing Vietnamese fighters with AKs. Interestingly, an improved version of the M14 later performed well as a designated marksman rifle in the Afghanistan War, giving it a second life. When the M14 proved inadequate, the M16 was rushed into service, but its early performance was also poor. The main reason was issues with the ammunition powder. Residue from the old propellant used in M16 rounds often caused malfunctions, including but not limited to gas tube blockages, failure to cycle, ejection failures, accidental discharges, and barrel corrosion. Moreover, the M16 used in Vietnam had a 20-round magazine, following the American bar tradition, which gave it inferior firepower compared to the AK-47. Against the backdrop of two generations of underperforming American rifles, the already robust AK-47 immediately demonstrated its charm as the king of guns on the battlefield. In the hands of Vietnamese farmers, the AK quickly established its image as a magical weapon. Although it had its drawbacks, such as high recoil and low accuracy in full auto fire, the AK successfully leveraged the battlefield environment to highlight its strengths. In the Vietnamese jungle, firefights often occurred at very close range, sometimes just a few dozen meters or even a few meters apart. At such distances, the error caused by muzzle rise wasn't significant, while firepower and adaptability were more crucial. The AK's decisive victory over two generations of American rifles in Vietnam made it world famous. Here's a widely circulated rumor worth addressing. American troops in Vietnam would discard their M16s and pick up AKs. While it's plausible that a soldier might use an AK if their M16 ran out of ammo during a mixed battle, or special ops teams might use AKs for infiltration missions, the idea that regular troops would abandon M16s for AKs is largely unfounded. Visibility in the Vietnamese jungle was very low, and soldiers often heard the enemy before seeing them. Both sides would typically fire a burst or throw grenades at the sound of enemy gunfire, even without visual confirmation. If American troops used AKs, they risked being shot by friendly fire. Life isn't like Counter-Strike. You only get one chance. Moreover, switching to an AK isn't as simple as just picking one up. You'd need to change to 7.62 by 39mm ammunition and replace your magazine pouches. By the time you finish switching, logistics would be questioning your sanity. The Vietnam War wasn't simply a matter of the M14 and M16 being outclassed by the AK. Beyond the bravery and tenacity of the Vietnamese People's Army, we can't ignore the constant support provided to Vietnam by China and the Soviet Union. The tacit understanding between China and the Soviet Union allowed military supplies to flow unimpeded. Without this, where would the Vietnamese have gotten so many AKs? Although the M16's reputation in Vietnam was mixed, the concept of small-caliber firearms gained recognition from the Soviet Union. This led to the birth of the AK-74, which gradually replaced the AKM. However, even in the 21st century, the AKM hasn't been completely phased out of Russian military service. Special forces still need it for use with silencers, as small-caliber guns with silencers and subsonic ammunition lack power, while the AKM's 7.62mm caliber performs well in this role. Even the latest generations of AK-15, AK-203, and AK-204 still use 7.62mm caliber, partly to complement the old AKM. After its initial design, the AK-47 had three main variants. In the 1950s, it was improved into the AKM model, recognizable by its distinctive slanted muzzle brake. The AK-47 in Counter-Strike is actually closer to the AKM, with its slanted muzzle brake, reinforcing ribs, and magazine all being AKM hallmarks, though it retains some elements of the original AK-47. Besides the Soviet-made AK, China produced the Type 56 submachine gun. Despite its name, it's actually an assault rifle, named as a submachine gun to distinguish it functionally from the Type 56 semi-automatic rifle and light machine gun. Most countries in the socialist bloc produced their own versions of the AK, with at least a dozen variants. If we include improvements made by various countries, there are easily over 20 different versions. Additionally, non-socialist countries like Finland, Israel, and Egypt have also produced AK copies. When it comes to AK-47 replicas, two are particularly interesting. The first is the Finnish RK-62, which copies the internal mechanics of the AK-47 but not its appearance. This rifle's operating principle is almost identical to the AK-47, yet its exterior is hardly recognizable as an AK. Perhaps the Finns didn't want others to notice the similarity, given their past conflict with the Soviet Union in 1940. The second intriguing replica is the Czech VZ-58, which mimics the AK's appearance but not its internal workings. Apart from its similar looks, the VZ-58's operating principle and structure are vastly different from the AK. It uses a short-stroke piston with a tilting breech block and a striker-fired mechanism, completely unlike the AK system. The Czech Republic, formerly part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, has consistently been a top-tier military-industrial power in Europe. Whether it's the Brin light machine gun or the later CZ-75 pistol, Czech firearms have always showcased the country's prowess in gun manufacturing. The Czech-developed VZ-58 boasts better accuracy in both single and automatic fire compared to the Soviet AK-47. It's lighter and has a higher rate of fire, though it's slightly less reliable than the AK. The two rifles look very similar because the VZ-58's design was based on a 1953 Czech automatic rifle with an AK-style structure. Interestingly, the Galil and Counter-Strike 1.6 is actually based on Israel's design, which was inspired by the Finnish AK-62, itself an AK-inspired rifle. Now, let's return to our main topic. Why is the AK called the King of Guns? Many players have asked why the AK is still in use after so many years, and whether its performance is truly exceptional, in terms of pure firearm performance. Many guns outperform the AK. The SG-556, known for its precision, and even the Galil ACE clearly outperform the AKM. So why is the AK still the most famous rifle? The AK-47 has several advantages. It's simple in structure, performs adequately, and is inexpensive. Its simple design means easy maintenance and low failure rates. Performance-wise, its 7.62 mm caliber provides sufficient power and range. The price factor, however, requires further explanation. The Soviet-made AK-47 wasn't the cheapest to produce, but the question is whether the AKs in circulation were actually Soviet-made. Even for Soviet-made AKs, what matters isn't the production cost but the transaction price. You might wonder how the transaction price could be lower than the production cost. Wouldn't that be a loss-making business? To understand this, we need to consider the broader context. During the Cold War, the US and USSR, as the world's two superpowers, were dedicated to attracting more allies. The US implemented the Marshall Plan to aid European allies and form NATO, while the Soviet Union provided extensive aid to form the Warsaw Pact with Eastern European socialist countries. This aid included industrial development, dam construction, technical support, factory equipment, food supplies, and military assistance, including AKs. Of course, this aid wasn't free. Since Khrushchev came to power, the Soviet Union changed its foreign policy from either friend or foe to, if not an enemy, then a friend. They provided weapons and equipment to many friendly countries, with the AK-47 being the best representation of this friendship. In 1959, the improved AKM significantly reduced production costs, leading to an explosive growth in AK production. Many of these Soviet-exported AKs were sold at low prices or even given away, sometimes with blueprints and production lines included. Few could resist such low prices. When Brezhnev took office, this military aid not only continued but expanded to more third-world countries, with even more generous support. In the 1970s, there was a saying, "The U.S. exports Coca-Cola, Japan exports Sony and Panasonic, and the Soviet Union exports AK-47s. During the 1960s and 70s, as independence movements swept through the Third World, the AK-47 became a central force in many liberation movements. People of different skin colors, ethnicities, and beliefs used AK-47s from various origins worldwide. Whether these movements succeeded is another story. In Chile, the famous leftist president Salvador Allende owned an AK-47 given to him by Fidel Castro. Allende fought with this AK against the rebels until his last moments before committing suicide. After his death, the image of Allende holding an AK spread worldwide, becoming a symbol of resistance against oppression. Many left-wing celebrities from the 60s and 70s were also photographed with AK-47s, adding a layer of ideological significance to the weapon. Of course, not all rulers had noble intentions. Many were simply power-hungry. In Africa, after centuries of colonial oppression, countries gradually gained independence after World War II. However, what people often encountered were dictators like Gaddafi and Amin. While national economies were perpetually in eco-round status, there was no shortage of guns and ammunition for turmoil and tyranny. Add tribal vendettas and warlord conflicts to the mix, and survival became a luxury for ordinary people. The arrival of the AK comprehensively upgraded the firepower in the African region. Due to its simple structure, even those with minimal education could master the AK in less than half an hour. It was cheap, sturdy, low maintenance, and used readily available ammunition. There was little reason to reject it. Although by the 1990s, the AK had fallen behind in terms of accuracy, weight, and attachment upgrades, for many African countries where tank crews who could drive tractors were considered elite and infantry who could aim down sights were seen as special forces, the AK remained a godly weapon. The Near and Middle East also had large numbers of AKs, some from Soviet aid, others acquired through Soviet-assisted countries. Through several Middle Eastern wars, Arab nations and Israel fought for decades, with many Arab armies using Soviet-aided AK-47s or their replicas. Despite its lackluster performance in some regions, the AK-47 and its ammunition remained abundant in the Middle East. By 1979, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, the Soviet Union's image as a champion of Third World countries began to crumble. The Soviets engaged in a decade-long counterinsurgency war in Afghanistan, but the anti-Soviet forces only grew stronger. In 1989, with the Soviet economy on the brink of collapse, they withdrew from Afghanistan. However, due to combat captures, defections, and external smuggling, a large number of AK-47s were left behind in Afghanistan. It's worth noting that the significant presence of AK-47s in Afghanistan was partly due to the covert support provided by the United States to the Taliban. This support contributed to the Middle East becoming a domain of 7.62 mm caliber firearms. Following the 2001 Afghan War, American troops once again faced the brunt of AK-47s for over 2 decades. In the late 1980s, the economies of the Soviet-led Warsaw Pact countries were in shambles. Citizens lined up in long queues just to buy essential goods. Yet the military arsenals were overflowing with AK-47s. Especially after the dramatic changes and dissolution of the Soviet Union, large quantities of AKs and other military hardware became a lucrative source of income for various warlords and militias. After the Soviet Union's dissolution, many countries opened the Pandora's box by selling off their military hardware at low prices. Ukraine, which was a major military-industrial hub during the Soviet era and capable of producing nuclear weapons, aircraft carriers, and strategic bombers, sold off everything except nuclear weapons. The film Lord of War depicts this era of Ukrainian arms sales, with the AK-47 being one of the best-selling items. These Soviet-made AKs were sold at extremely low prices, sometimes for just a few dollars. The reasons for these low prices were economic hardships and a general disregard for inventory losses. It was a time when reporting large batches of military hardware as lost was not unusual. Apart from Ukraine, Albania also faced economic crisis and unrest due to a massive Ponzi scheme, resulting in 667,000 guns going missing. Although most were recovered later, thousands remained unaccounted for. This serves as a warning against believing in high-return investments. What you see as interest, others see as your principal. These AK-47s, handled by arms dealers, were sold to various regions including Africa, the Middle East, and the Balkans. Additionally, the Soviets often provided blueprints along with their AKs, making it easy for third world countries to manufacture their own versions. Local factories around the world continued to produce and sell these cloned AKs, even including handmade versions from Pakistan that were sold in Afghanistan. In the 1990s, the Balkans were Europe's largest powder keg. Slavic people of different faiths, following the dissolution of Yugoslavia, viewed each other as sworn enemies and engaged in continuous conflict from 1990 to 1999, using various versions and sources of AKs. Ethnic cleansing was a recurring theme during this period. In Africa, warlords and presidents ignited numerous wars, some of which continue to this day. The Rwandan genocide stands out as a particularly tragic event, with the AK-47 becoming the executioner's tool. On Middle Eastern battlefields, Iraqi forces wielding Tabuk rifles, a clone of the AK, invaded Kuwait and later abandoned their arms during the Gulf War. The Taliban, armed with AKs, marched into Kabul as victors, becoming the new rulers for the first time. In the Americas, drug cartels in Colombia and Mexico acquired large quantities of AKs from arms dealers, often outgunning law enforcement. Entering the 21st century, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq following the 9/11 attacks once again made the AK-47 a mainstay on battlefields. On television, one could see terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS wielding AKs. Osama bin Laden was one of the most notorious figures associated with the AK, which had by then become a tool for extremist terrorists. The global use of AKs can be attributed to their cost-effectiveness. Having a gun is one thing, but having ammunition is crucial, especially in the Middle East and Africa, where military hardware is scarce. Soviet 7.62 by 39 mm ammunition is abundant and thus the best choice. Other high-quality 5.56 mm caliber rifles like the AR series, SG-556, and 416 Hong Kong dollars are useless without ammunition. In photos from various conflict zones, you can see the presence of AKs, including Soviet, Polish, Romanian, Egyptian, and AK-74 variants. For military enthusiasts, if all bolt-action rifles are considered 98 Burmese shots, then all rifles with curved magazines and wooden stocks are AK-47s, a notion that isn't entirely off base. The AK-47's fame can be understood given its origins in resisting Nazi invasion and defending the Soviet Union. Following historical events, the AK-47's robust performance, high value for money, and massive production numbers have spread it across 6 continents and 92 countries, earning it the title of King of Guns. However, as those wielding AKs transitioned from democratic presidents like Allende to invading Middle Eastern dictators like Saddam Hussein, from revolutionary warriors like Sankara to terrorist leaders like bin Laden, and from inspiring independence movements to perpetrating civilian massacres and coups, this king of guns also transformed from a liberator's red blade to a blood-soaked executioner's tool. The AK-47, with over 100 million units produced globally, has become synonymous with the king of guns, but beneath its throne lies over 20 million victims. Hopefully, in the future, the AK-47 will exist only in the realm of video games.